so for those of you who don't know me, my name's Sapan Ghai. I am Chief Commercial Officer of Sovereign Metals Limited. Sovereign is listed on the AIM as SVML. We have a current share price, I think, closed at about 22.5p today, which equates to a £126 million market cap-ish. We have about £22 million of cash in the kitty, and what we're doing is developing the Cassia rutile graphite deposit in Malawi, and I'll get into those details as we move along. So the usual disclaimers and disclosures. Okay, so when you're thinking about investing in junior mining companies, I'd like anyone listening and viewing this to really think about the last time they were able to hear a company say that they are looking to they are targeting to become the market leader in two critical minerals from one deposit, and that market leader status is in the form of being the largest producer in rutile and graphite, the lowest cost producer in rutile and graphite, and the lowest emissions producer in making both rutile and graphite. That's really our vision, our mission statement is essentially to become the market leader in those two commodities. Before I carry on, for those of you who are asking the question, I've heard of graphite, but what is this rutile? Let's touch on that. So rutile is effectively the highest purity, highest grade form of titanium that you can find naturally on Earth. Titanium is in itself not a scarce mineral or element, I should say. It's actually the 9th most abundant element in the Earth's crust. However, finding commercially viable titanium is a whole other story. And really, there are only two types of mineralization or titanium mineral that are considered commercially viable. The first, and this accounts for probably 95% of the world's titanium supply, comes from ilmenite. Now, ilmenite is about 30 to 60% titanium dioxide. Titanium dioxide is the commercial component within these minerals, and it currently sells for about $300 to $400 a ton. In order to convert ilmenite into a usable high-grade titanium feedstock material, it needs to be either roasted or smelted using quite energy and carbon intensive processes. The other mineral that contains titanium commercially is rutile, and that's what we have. Now, rutile has around 95% plus titanium dioxide. It's priced today at around $1,900 per ton, so well above the ilmenite price. And the reason for that is at 95% titanium dioxide or TiO2, it needs no processing, no smelting, no roasting. It is a direct use material that can feed the titanium industry and the end users. What are the main uses of this rutile? Well, it caters for a number of billion-dollar end-use industries, but about well over half of it ends up in pigments. Now, that's in the form of white paints, papers, cosmetics, plastics, anything that you see which has been colored white. The white there once upon a time used to exist because we used lead in our paint and our pigments. back in the 1920s. We thought better of it and moved to using titanium dioxide. 30% of rutile ends up in the welding industry as electrode flux. So as long as we are building materials out of metal where we need to put two pieces of metal together, we require to weld those. In order to weld those in a um, high quality manner, we need rutile. And about 10% of the market for rutile ends up in titanium metal. So this is everything from the landing gear of your 747 through to your dental implants, hip joints, even your new Apple iPhone. So if rutile is so great, why aren't we just using it instead of ilmenite? Well, the reality is rutile is a extremely scarce commodity. It's essentially before we found our project, the world was running out of rutile. Here on the left-hand side of this chart, you can see the global rutile supply out to 2033. And these are existing and likely mines that are coming online. And we think that, or independently, we've been told that we'll lose about half the global rutile supply between now and 2033. That's pretty much as much rutile as we intend to produce. So when we come online, we would be bringing that rutile supply back up to today's numbers. Our second commodity from the same deposit is graphite. Now, graphite's had a bit of a resurgence recently as people are becoming more aware that graphite makes up to 50% of a lithium-ion battery. It is what the anode part of a battery is made from. It's a critical mineral for energy transition per the US Inflation Reduction Act. It's also considered critical for the EU and Japan. That criticality was demonstrated late last year when China decided to curb its exports on graphite to other countries for reasons of national security, bearing in mind that China produces more graphite and more battery anodes than anyone else. What's driving the demand side for graphite? Essentially electrification. About half of the demand for graphite now is from the battery industry. That's increased from around 10% only 3 years ago. So we're seeing a bit of an uptick in graphite demand. So our project, Cassia, we've called this a once-in-a-generation discovery because essentially that's what it is. It's the world's largest known rutile deposit with 18 million tons, which makes it the biggest by at least a factor of 2. It's also the world's second largest flake graphite resource with 24 million tons of graphite. It covers an area of about 200 square kilometers, being about 30 kilometers long, and it has the Nacala rail corridor running just under the tip of the Cassia project. So in September last year, we completed a pre-feasibility study to understand the economics of this project. We asked ourselves the question, if we were to mine Cassia for 25 years and build a sustainable world-class plant at Cassia, but that plant could and the infrastructure around it could be financed by a company of the size of Sovereign Metals, what would the economics look like? And what we saw was for a $600 million capex, to first production, we'd have an after-tax net present value of Cassia of 1.6 billion US, an after-tax IRR of 28%, and an average annual EBITDA of $415 million per year for 25 years. Our operating costs of just over $400 a ton would make us the lowest cost producer in both commodities. Interestingly, operating Cassia for 25 years would only mine 30% of the currently known mineralization. Just behind this wording is actually quite a nice drone shot of Cassia. You can see a little bit of drilling going on here. And if you look out to the horizon, that's Cassia continuing. So we'd be the lowest cost rutile producer in the mineral sands sector, bar none. We'd also be the lowest cost graphite producer outside of China. This chart effectively shows the production and operating costs of listed graphite companies who have given their operating costs and production figures in studies over the past 3 or 4 years. The taller your bar, the higher your costs. The wider your bar, the more your production. We are the widest and we are the lowest cost. Now, interestingly, I've talked about the size of our production, the size of our deposit being the largest, our cost being the lowest. But very importantly, our carbon footprint in producing rutile would be the lowest out of any other ilmenite-derived titanium alternatives. So titania slag, which you see in the middle of this bar chart, is produced by Rio Tinto. And to produce a ton of titania slag from ilmenite, you have to put 2 tons of CO2 or equivalent greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. For synthetic rutile, that goes up to 3.3 tons. Cassia's rutile, which naturally is higher grade than titania slag or synthetic rutile, would only produce 0.1 tons of CO2 emissions for every ton of rutile. Why is that important to you and me or any other investors looking at this? Well, our end users within the titanium space, whether they be Apple, whether they be Boeing, whether they be Colgate, when your titanium ends up in your toothpaste, whether it be Akzo Nobel and their Dulux paint, they are all looking at their supply chains. They are all auditing their supply chains, and they are gearing towards lowering the emissions of their supply chains throughout their production processes. So if you are the lowest input in the upstream of their supply chain, you automatically garner a favorable or preferable supplier stamp, essentially. Same story on the graphite. Because of this deposit, because the way it sits, because it's at surface, because this is not a hard rock deposit, our graphite can be produced at the lowest global warming potential of any other graphite supply that is looking to come into the market. Specifically, we are much lower than the Chinese production, which sits at 1.2 on this chart. That's just Chinese natural graphite. If I was to put Chinese synthetic graphite production and the CO2 emissions from that, that would break the chart because it comes out at about 20 tons of CO2 emissions per ton of synthetic graphite. Again, same story with the end users. Tesla back in 2022, who clearly do use synthetic graphite within the batteries to their vehicles, said to take steps to significantly reduce our impact, we must understand the true emissions footprint of our supply chain. Now, a picture tells 1,000 words. So we've got a couple of photos here of our setup in Malawi, our lab, which is less of a lab and more of a factory these days, is this panoramic shot at the top here. Essentially what you're seeing here is the core being delivered from our drilling, and across the sides of the floor is a micro processing lab. It essentially, we can bring this material in, and we can, at the end, we can produce rutile and graphite using very simple physical processes of gravitational separation. Rutile is very heavy. It comes away from the lighter stuff through just running it through spirals or shaking it on a shaking table. The lighter stuff is where the graphite sits. Everything that we look at in terms of the process is all very conventional, very well understood. There are no pyro involved. There's no, there's no chemicals involved. There's no acids. None of that. This is all a very simple physical operation. Down here is a quick picture of us completing our bulk test work on graphite sampling. So what we've done there is we've produced about 100 tons of graphite containing ore, which we are shipping to labs and end users around the world. In order to pre-concentrate that ore, we have new equipment on site. As you can see, that's being installed. And here's a picture of the rutile that just comes away from this lab. Now, when you have a world-class asset, tier one project, it's very hard for a mining junior to really unlock its true potential, its true value, and understand how best to go ahead with developing such a project. So in July last year, we welcomed Rio Tinto as an investor. Rio Tinto owns 15% of the listed shares in Sovereign Metals. They paid 40 million Australian dollars, so that's about 23 million pounds. That gave them the 15% plus an option to acquire another 4.99% within 12 months. So that's before July, middle of July this year. That 4.99% would take them to the takeover threshold under Australian regulations of 19.99%. The funds will be used to advance the DFS at Cassia. Rio Tinto, who have something like 2,000 customers, including the likes of Ford, BMW, Volvo, will be assisting us in qualifying our graphite for lithium-ion batteries to go into electric vehicles. We will together negotiate any funding arrangements for a construction. Yes.
Sapan, I was just going to say we're going to run out of time for questions if you're not careful.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
I'll be very quick. The key takeaway from here is the operator option. So Rio has the option to become operator of Cassia up to 180 days post us announcing a definitive feasibility study. Now, Rio's not in the business of operating mines on for junior companies, so read into that what you will. Great support from the government of Malawi. Mining is one of its three pillars for economic development. The president himself spoke at the UN General Assembly back in 22, where he mentioned the economic importance of Cassia, so you can't get it on a grander scale than that. Obviously, we do all the right stuff as a socially responsible company within Malawi. We actually announced today that we have appointed Social Essence, which is a team from First Quantum Minerals, and they helped First Quantum with the development of their copper mines in Zambia. They now are part of our owners team. And I'll leave this up as I take questions.
So let me just get my camera. There we go. Okay, so Malawi has a scarcity of land resources and population is dependent on natural resources. How will these headwinds be managed as you increase production?
So Malawi's actually doesn't really have an issue with population. There's about 18 million people who live there. For such a small country, that's quite a lot. Um, in terms of mining, it's a massive part of their push, which I just alluded to. They have a economic development strategy. Look, Malawi is something like the ninth or 10th poorest country in the world. They get most of their GDP from foreign aid. They know they have to wean themselves off that foreign aid and become self-sufficient. And part of that is boosting their agriculture in the form of tobacco, nuts, maize. Um, they are boosting their tourism. So if anyone has the spare cash and wants to go on a nice holiday, try out Lake Malawi. And mining is that third pillar. And specifically, since Rio has made the investment, the Malawian government has made a number of or signaled in a number of ways that they essentially wanted Cassia built yesterday. They've put together what a interministerial committee, so that is the key members of the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Land, the Ministry of Water, etc., all who convene once a month under the banner of the Cassia Committee. And their job is just to help us navigate our way through everything from permitting, development, construction, HR, having the right workforce, etc., the fiscal regime within Malawi. And so we have this one-stop shop that we just need to deal with in order to develop Cassia.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just touching on the size of the company and the employees, how does that affect local workers in terms of your base and your concern for making sure that everybody is treated fairly?
Yep. So the appointment of Social Essence is part of
Yeah.
that. We've brought in, and we will continue to bring in, and there will be a number of announcements on us building out our owners team. But we are bringing in blue chip teams, blue chip individuals from blue chip companies who have been there, done that on world class big scale tier one deposits around the world, or projects around the world that require exactly that. So look, we currently have about 80 staff in Malawi. 30% of that staff are female. Once in construction, we'll have well over 1,000 employees, which we hope will be Malawian. And once in production, we'll have a couple of hundred more than that.
Okay. Okay. So going along on those same lines, when do you think you'll be looking to make a profit?
So look, we are in the throes of going back to our PFS numbers, which
Hmm.
were done by Sovereign Metals standalone. We're now taking apart the assumptions within the PFS alongside our partners Rio Tinto. Rio, with its 150 years of experience in mining, is bringing all this technological know-how, mining know-how, engineering know-how, social, environmental know-how into the mix for us to better understand where we can probably save costs, increase revenue, increase efficiencies. And we're working on that for probably up until the middle of this year. We'll keep the market informed as we continue to go along that optimization process. At the end, in the middle of this year, we will move to a DFS stage where, together with Rio, we will figure out what our DFS should look like. That'll take about a
Hmm.
year to complete, and then another year and a half. Then 2.5 years of construction. So an easy number, a comfortable number would be 2028.
Okay. All right. Fine. Well, we've run over on time on that, Sapan, but thank you very much. Good to see you again. Hopefully we'll see you in the flesh at some point to one of our live events. I'm sure people would like to see you and question you over a glass of wine. So thanks for your presentation this evening. I wish you
Definitely.
well, and I'll see you. Cheers now. Bye bye.
Thanks, Chris.